Welcome, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today. This is the second session in the 2026 Kidney Patient Advisory Council's summer webinar series. I am Kelly Brooks. I'm coordinator for the Forum of ESRD Networks, and today's webinar will focus on nutrition for CKD and ESRD. We are extremely fortunate to have two experts in the field here to share some of the research, as well as two patients who've seen the difference dietary changes can make in one's health. But first, I have a few housekeeping items I want to go over quickly. If you could please remain muted, that will help minimize background noise and interruptions. You will have an opportunity to submit questions using the chat feature. You may submit questions at any time during the presentation, and we'll answer those questions at the end of the webinar. Today's presentation is being recorded, and we will be posting it to the forum website for future reference. A survey link to an evaluation form will be included in the chat, and I'm also going to send a follow-up email to everyone after the webinar, and we would very much appreciate your feedback. So please use that survey link to give us some comments. We do have one more webinar in this series, which will focus on vocational rehabilitation. So be sure to register for that. You can scan the QR code here and visit the registration page at the link that's posted on the slide. I'm also going to post a link in the chat. It's going to be a really good webinar, so I hope you'll consider attending. For those who are not familiar with the Forum of ESRD Networks, we are a national nonprofit organization that works to support the 18 ESRD networks in their contracts with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. We undertake projects of mutual interest to the networks and the Forum. The Kidney Patient Advisory Council, who is hosting this webinar series, is made up of patient advocates from all 18 ESRD networks. As the heart of the forum, the KPAC provides an invaluable patient perspective to all of our activities. Now for our speakers, I'd like to introduce Dr. Cam Kalantar, who is a professor of medicine at UCLA with a special interest and expertise in nutrition. Dr. Kalantar is also immediate past president of the forum and serves on our medical advisory council representing ESRD Network 18. So take it away, Dr. Kalantar.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen here. And assuming this is working in the next 10 minutes, I would like to focus on dialysis patients, which is somewhat different than colleagues who are not on dialysis and they have CKD or post-dialysis or transplant. One of the textbooks where some of my slides come from is the Nutrition Management of Kidney Disease with Dr. Koppel, late Dr. Mastry, and myself. And one question is always, does dialysis cause wasting or protein energy wasting? And is protein energy wasting associated or affects survival? The answer is yes and yes. So dialysis, which is life-saving, everything has a price. So therefore, we need to know that when you take a medication, when you do a procedure called dialysis, it means that it's going to cost something, and it's not monetary cost, it's the cost of your nutritional reserves. So hence is the question, if somebody is on dialysis, is it good to have higher weight or lower weight? This is essentially not a question of weight management. This is actually a question of survival now. Now, there is something called the obesity paradox. Studies such as this one suggest in the general population, when your weight is higher, I'm going to turn on my laser pointer. That means obesity is associated with higher mortality. But look at here now, on dialysis patients, it's the opposite. This has been called obesity paradox or reverse epidemiology. There's been a lot of debates if it is correct or not. For example, when we ask people to lose weight for transplant wait listing, is it a good idea or not? But these are relatively consistent data to the point that in thousands of dialysis patients, as you can see, 88,000 dialysis patients from DaVita dialysis clinics as well as Fresenius similar data, weight loss, survival is affected, whereas weight gain, that means a dialysis patient who has cramps and hence needs to increase dry weight, I always say good news. So you are gaining weight. That's a good thing. So this is weight loss and this is weight gain in dry weight, not water weight, dry weight. So one is called protein energy wasting, the other one is correction of protein energy wasting. Now the next question is, if the solid weight is good, is the fat part of it is good or muscle part, right? So as the third part would be viscera and bone. But these two parts, muscle versus fat, which one is the winner? Now, you would be surprised to know that studies such as this one suggested that dialysis patients whose body fat is 24 to 36%, this is the best, actually, believe it or not, uh, place to survive dialysis. To survive dialysis. Again, I'm not talking today about CKD without dialysis. I'm not talking about transplant, I'm talking about dialysis. And you may say, wow, this is not a good message that the calendar is conveying. So what is next? Next is that studies such as this one have shown the higher is the muscle mass, the lower is mortality. So muscle mass confers survival too. So at least I corrected myself. One bad message was that our studies have shown fat is good, but our studies have also shown muscle is good. So therefore, both of them, that means anything that adds to the solid weight is good, but we say if fat is good, muscle is better. What about appetite? You would be surprised to know that good appetite on dialysis, a dialysis patient who feels hungry and wants to eat, is associated with the best longevity. And this is not just for dialysis patient. Any person, any sick person, the moment says, "Oh, I'm hungry," you should smile. That's always a good sign. Of course, with appetite comes responsibility, but it's always any happy person, any less sick person is going to be hungry. All right. Now, there are also malnutrition inflammation scores or MIS score, which is a derivative of SGA, and other things that if people who are on dialysis or dietitians who run dialysis patients, especially in the Vita and VA, they're familiar with that. And this is MIS score, a score between 0 to 30. The lower it means the better or the less malnutrition. But let's move on to a question. Question one. Which of the following is the strongest predictor of better survival of a dialysis patient? Higher hemoglobin, lower phosphorus, lower albumin, lower calcium. And while you're thinking, for especially if there are dialysis patients who are watching us, higher serum albumin, believe it or not, is the strongest predictor of survival. Now, what is albumin? And I see that there are questions and comments in the chat. Now, studies such as this one, again, look at here, 56,920 hemodialysis patients. What was shown here, if we lose your serum albumin, if your monthly dialysis serum albumin goes from 4.1 to 3.8, that means goes down, mortality goes up. But if we do something that serum albumin of a dialysis patient improves, survival improves and mortality goes down. So look at here, this is again mortality on this side. And here is gain in survival by increasing the level of serum albumin. So therefore, it's very relevant here. That's the reason why guidelines have always looked at serum albumin above 4. The Vita Fresenius US Renal, they always look at how many patients they have with serum albumin below 4 so that they can reduce that number. If you are a dialysis patient with albumin below 4, don't worry. There are always ways to increase that. So that means opportunity is there. Higher serum albumin, greater survival. Now, this is a little bit more complex scientific, but believe it or not, these are also modeling data from thousands of dialysis patients. So if I could share this with you this way, this suggests that the higher is protein intake, NPCR is what every month we measure as protein intake of dialysis patient, the better is survival, and like as high as 1 grams per kilograms or 1.3 grams per kilograms. Right now, KDOKI suggests 1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram. That's the best survival. And also, as you can see here, that's the same as here. These are the same. But what about change? If we look at also change in protein intake, that means increase in dietary protein intake is associated with survival. and associated with increasing serum albumin, because a lot of people say my serum albumin is low because I have infection, inflammation, diabetic foot ulcer. No matter what the cause of low serum albumin is, nutritional support. I mean, the entire field of nutritional support is based on the premise that no matter what the cause of malnutrition is, if we support nutrition, we can improve. We can improve. All right. So now, next question. Imagine I want a lot of protein for my dialysis patients, or I'm on dialysis, I want to eat a lot of protein. High protein associated with which one of them? High phosphorus intake. So if I eat a lot of protein, my phosphorus goes up, my potassium goes up. Also, no matter what I do, I'm going to drink with that, and everything has fluid, and acidosis gets worse. So what is the correct answer? The answer is all of the above. Therefore, here we come with this problem. Is there anything left for me to eat? We always tell dialysis patients that, hey, you have to eat so many things and you have not to eat so many things, right? Don't eat this, don't eat potassium, don't eat phosphorus, don't eat high glycemic load. So what is left to eat? Is there anything left for me to eat if I'm a dialysis patient, right? That's a very valid question. So let's talk about eating during dialysis versus giving intradialytic through vein. That means nutrition through vein. It's called IDPN. IDPN still is a valid and important option, but imagine we become like Europe and like Asia, and we allow patients to eat during dialysis. And this study has shown, as well as several studies, that patients who get IDPN, they go to positive anabolic balance, which is a good thing. That means they gain muscle. But once dialysis stops, IDPN also goes down, whereas a patient who ate during dialysis, the anabolic effect remains, sustains, right? And this is a similar a study to that end. Dr. Connie Ree and a number of people conducted dialysis patients in 20 dialysis clinics in Los Angeles were randomized to eat low or high protein, high chicken sandwiches and or high protein sandwiches with a lot of chicken or tuna fish versus just salad with no protein, just 1 gram of protein. And what was shown here, and also a phosphorus binder for high protein, and what was shown here that albumin improved more in high protein groups. I mean, those who ate high protein meals or trays during dialysis as compared to low proteins. Now, I'm going to share with you here something, and this is my last 1 minute, and hopefully you're going to like it. Let me see if I can do this. This was supposed to be a video. Make it this way, maybe that works. So as you can see here, this is not a restaurant, this is a dialysis unit. And where is it? It's Germany, Würzburg, Germany. I used to work here a number of years ago. I went to medical school in Germany. I was moonlighting Würzburg dialysis. And look at here. This is meal trays for dialysis first shift and second shift and third shift in Würzburg. These are dialysis technicians. They create even coffee and they're serving dialysis patients. I mean, this is like a business class dialysis. They even have their own bed. It's not just chair. That's a requirement in Germany and most countries that dialysis patients. And look, they're enjoying dialysis and a 3 or 4-star or 5-star meals. And I think at some point, hopefully we team up to make that happen. And I'm going to go to, and this is a dialysis unit so some people are surprised, wow, this is a dialysis unit. So I'm going to go to my last slide, that never, ever should we ever forget that dialysis means hope, hope of rehabilitation. And despite all flaws, dialysis still prolongs life. We should be very proud that we have dialysis for everybody in the United States. But I'm going to summarize here my slides. In summary, measures of nutritional status correlate much more strongly than anything else than anemia or phosphorus or potassium with mortality or survival. So there are scoring systems to look at or to stratify, re-stratify dialysis patients. Change means change. That means a dialysis patient whose weight goes up or goes down, that means a lot. Serum albumin is a strong predictor, and doing something such as high protein diet to increase serum albumin could have an impact. And and we should know high protein means high phosphorus, high potassium, high fluid. But imagine we create special meals. For example, our wonderful chef Dwayne creates a company, creates an enterprise for meals, high protein meals, low potassium, low phosphorus for all dialysis patients in the country. And nutritional interventions and high protein meals during dialysis may improve survival. And I would like to acknowledge my colleagues, and I'm going to stop here and unshare. And thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Kalantar. That is important data and information to underscore today's discussion. I love the idea of patients enjoying food while on dialysis. That's fantastic. So thank you for sharing that. Next, we have Jessiana Seville. Ms. Seville is the owner and president of Kidney Nutrition Institute. She is a renal dietitian with many years of experience assisting kidney patients through nutritional guidance. So I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Kelly. Nice to be here today, everyone. What Cam shared perfectly segues into what I'm going to talk about, which is nourishment, a little bit of the liberalization of guidelines. And I'm going to share just two things that can work for both CKD and PKD patients. Let me move this off the screen so we can move forward. What has happened in nutrition in the last 20 years, especially, is that nutrition for people with kidney disease has changed from there's only one narrow way with all these restrictions to it honestly depends on the patient. It is not an across the board restriction for potassium or like almost any nutrient. It honestly depends on the patient and the labs. So the old quote unquote renal diet was one that had no potassium and no phosphorus. And often you'd hear things like have a low sodium diet, but nobody knew what that meant. So very diligent patients would basically go to no sodium. We always say no is not better than low. Like you need some sodium. And then maybe there would be a discussion about protein. This is very old, but now we know that the new way, which is applicable both to dialysis patients and for patients with CKD that want to preserve function, that we need to be conscious of potassium if needed. That's based on your labs. That is our KDIGO guidelines. It's very clear there. You want to get the right type of phos, so you don't want phosphate additives, but some naturally occurring phosphorus, such as nuts and beans and whole grains, is considered more acceptable now versus the old renal diet was like white foods, right? Very processed foods. Helping people find the right amount of sodium, helping people target protein in the correct way. So if you're on dialysis, you probably need more, like Cam talked about. If you're CKD, you might need less. Both populations can benefit from plant proteins, where historically we've always thought like, oh, once you're on dialysis, you need to eat lots of meat. Not necessarily true anymore. Understanding alkaline diets, and then really looking at other things that are going to impact outcomes such as anemia, or thyroid, or micronutrients. So the field has evolved to allow patients to be much more nourished than they used to be. Just a couple like short pieces here. If on potassium, right, across the board, hemodialysis or CKD, know your potassium levels, right? If you need to talk with your doctor, your dietitian, but if it's less than 5, you may not need a restriction. And if it's more than 5, then you may need one, but you need to find out what else might be impacting it. And I always say for patients, if you're like, what do I eat here? Choose one list. One list given by your dietitian. There are lists online, but that can be very complicated. For phosphorus, it used to be don't eat nuts, don't eat beans, don't eat peanut butter, don't eat whole grains. And now these really are genuinely okay if you have CKD. Of course, you want to work with your individual professional, but a lot of times these work perfectly in people's diets, even on dialysis. I did work in Texas for a while where we had a lot of pecans, and I had a few patients that would eat a lot, and just the overall quantity would bump their phosphorus levels up. But for the most part, these foods can fit in normal portions and just fine. You do want to watch out for phosphorus additives in food. And then for sodium, get the right amount. For most people, 0 sodium is not good. It leads to all sorts of complications. Having some is okay, but definitely not excessive amounts. So 2 things on what you can do. So I want to talk about whole foods first. Again, I wanted to preface with this liberalization and this expanded approach to people being able to eat more food than they used to. Again, classically, the good patient was very restrictive. Now the good patient is able to eat more. So whole foods, not talking about the store. I'm talking about foods in a more natural form, the form that they might be when they are harvested, for example. Maybe you chop them up, maybe they're frozen, but instead of something like rice-a-roni or a packaged food, so think about the things that you have pulled out of a bag or a box. How could you make that closer to its original form, right? Rice-a-roni could definitely fit in some diets. It's quite high in salt if you're using the flavoring packet, but what if you were to just use brown rice? Cook up some veggies, cook some fish or chicken to go with that. That could work a lot better. Put your own seasoning on there. You're going to get more fiber, less sodium, less artificial flavors and preservatives, which can really be a big, big factor in people's decline, and more nutrients. So when you talk about nourishment, more nourishment, better nutrition is better outcomes. You get that by getting foods that are closer to their whole form. Another way you can add more whole foods is put them at every meal. So I put a sandwich here that's a pretty classic, meal that people might have. It is a tuna fish sandwich or veggie sandwich. Even if it's carrots or apples or cucumber slices, add them on the side. If you're having breakfast, add something whole on the side with it. Adding that at every single meal, choosing those for your snacks instead of packaged foods that are in bags or boxes is going to add an immense amount of nutrients. And whether you have CKD, whether you're on hemodialysis or post-transplant, this seems so simple, yet it is massively impactful and important for every single person, really, especially for patients. The other thing is fit more whole foods in your diet. Now, I put this picture in here especially to talk again about this principle because I knew there were bananas here and people would be like, whoa, don't eat bananas. You guys probably saw in that little video that Cam showed, they were pouring orange juice. Now, I am saying that there's probably more foods available to you than you think. And when we expand our options and look for color in our diet and find ways to enjoy them, you will become better nourished. This genuinely, people cannot believe how big of a difference it makes when they start taking out packaged foods, that it makes a huge difference. Certainly, there are some things we say that packaged food is the vehicle. So if you're having bread, right, that's a packaged food. Maybe you're going to be putting veggies on it and your meat and like whatever other nutrients that you need. Sometimes the simple packaged food is a vehicle for the other great foods. But as much as possible, you want to stick with whole foods. Now, the second principle, just kind of piggybacking on what Cam said, is that you want to keep and support your muscle mass. Now, eating well is going to help out with that, but there's a couple easy things you can also do. I can't emphasize this enough. Whole foods, keep and support your muscle mass. Muscle mass, other than just mobility and you feel good, muscle is doing so many things for you and for your health without you doing anything. It's worthwhile to keep it and to gain it if you can. Maybe if you have a lot of ability to move, then find ways to really add strength. If you just are getting back to more mobility, maybe it's sitting in your chair and being able to move your arms, right? However you can increase mobility and muscle mass, it is protecting your bones and your joints, and it's helping generate metabolic benefits for you. It is just so beneficial. You can use apps if you're really engaged with like tracking a streak. There's tons of amazing apps out there. Some people really do good with just a weighted vest if you're dealing with osteoporosis, to just add a little bit of weight to gain a little bit of more muscle mass is a great intervention for folks that are struggling with osteoporosis. So kept it really simple tonight. The field is definitely expanding for more nourishment, and 2 simple things you can do. If there's nothing else, start looking at where you can add whole foods, reduce packaged foods, and keep and support your muscle mass.
Wonderful tips. Thank you so much for that. These are all things that we can benefit from, kidney patients and non-kidney patients. So super helpful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jessiana. I would like to move to our first patient, Chef Dwayne Sunwald, who has a very unique experience with nutrition and kidney disease. I don't want to give anything away, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Chef Dwayne.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. Amazing presenters. I always enjoy learning things when I do these webinars. So thank you. So yes, I'm a kidney patient. I was diagnosed with minimal change disease, and over the period of about 4 months, I saw 5 different kidney doctors, and only one of them ever talked to me about nutrition. And she actually said, you know, your kidneys are stressed out, you're spilling protein, you probably should, cut back on animal protein. And like a good patient, I didn't listen to her for about 5 more months, and my creatinine level actually kept rising, and I was feeling worse. And I teach at a culinary school, so we have a dietitian teaching culinary students. She was following my case, and she came into my office one morning and said, I want to do an experiment. I want to take you off of animal protein just for 90 days, and let's see what happens. And I said, great, I'm feeling awful. Let's try this. And what shocked me was within 2 weeks of going to a plant-based diet, I actually started feeling better. 18 months of pharmaceutical treatment and doing what my doctor said really wasn't making me feel better. But changing my diet, and I actually converted to a vegan diet, which is all plant-based. I was able, over about a 2-year period, I was weaned off of all medication. My kidneys are now functioning normally, and I've been like this now for 20 years. So I'm a really, really strong advocate for plant-based diets or plant-dominant diets. So what I want to talk to you about from a chef perspective is, I have to admit, at first, I thought this was going to be very easy. I was around food all my life. And one of the things I had to learn was that I had to change my eating pattern, my habits. But once I started doing that, and it was a slow transition, but what I found was that a plant-dominant diet gives you so much more variety. You have so many more food choices to choose from. And I actually really enjoy grocery shopping now. I literally start in the produce section, and Kelly, this is such a perfect time of the year for this kind of webinar. All the fresh fruits and vegetables are in season. They're at their best quality, their lowest price. So this was just perfect timing. And I go through the produce section, and that's how I pick my dinner. So let me give you a little story. Yesterday, I was returning some things to a friend who's a gardener, and gardeners love vegans this time of year because they're like, oh, please come to my garden. I'm like, okay, let me, you're very proud of your garden. I want to see your vegetables. And I walked out of there with this grocery bag of all these fresh vegetables last night. And I'm driving home and I'm like, what do I do with this? I wasn't really planning on anything for dinner. And he gave me a spaghetti squash and some Walla Walla sweet onions. And I'm driving home and my mind's just going all over the place. And I came home and I made this amazing curry vegetable dish with spaghetti squash, some fresh broccoli, fresh spinach, had some sweet Walla Walla onions in it. And I'm like, wow, this was such a flavorful dinner. Like, my family goes, Dad, this is like restaurant quality food. So my point is that being a kidney patient doesn't mean you have to lose out on flavor. And I love the fact that all these nutritional guidelines are giving us more variety now. So I think that's the way to go. And I think everything the 2 previous presenters said, all I can say is I love what they have to say, and it's amazing how we can work with that in the kitchen now and give patients such great flavor.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And listening to you talk always makes me so hungry, and it makes me wanna wanna completely upend my diet and go vegan. It's so encouraging. So thank you so much for sharing your story. Um, our last patient is a kidney patient and transplant recipient Glenda Roberts. Ms. Roberts has a fascinating story about using nutrition and exercise to maintain her health status for many years. So I will let her share it now.
Thank you very much, Kelly. So I can't tell you how exciting this conversation is. And I wish somebody had been able to have that conversation with me 50 years ago. Fortunately, in the last 10 years or so, I met Chef Dwayne. So I have been the beneficiary of some of that curved spice he's got. I'm just saying, y'all need to try to hook it up because it is really delicious and it makes a huge difference in your meals. But when my story started, we got very little advice about kidney disease and managing it with food and exercise. So I had just graduated from college. I had been turned 21 the month before. I thought I was grown. I getting ready to get me a job. Had two fantastic job offers, and I turned down one because they weren't paying enough. I decided to go with the money. But before I could start, I actually got a call from the oil company that said, we're not going to be able to hire you because you have too much protein in your urine and you're sick. I said, I'm not sick because I had already turned down the other job. I said, I'm not sick. I'm fine. She said, nope, can't hire you. So I called my mother, who lived in Fort Worth, Texas, and I said, they're not going to give me that job because they say that I'm sick. And she said, well, come home and we'll find a kidney doctor. At the time, we didn't know about nephrologists. Like, this was back in 1970. We had never heard of nephrologists. But my mother's niece did know a urologist, and she was very well connected politically. So she had the conversation that says, you need to see my cousin and see what we can do about getting her this job. So I go to see the urologist, and he comes in and he says, well, I'm going to write a letter and tell the oil company that they should hire you because I am unable to duplicate their test results. And I thought, that's great. And he said, and as soon as they hire you, you should go on dialysis. I was like, what is dialysis and why should I do this? And keep in mind, this is back during the 70s where doctors weren't even accustomed to patients responding to them, much less ask them questions about what they were recommending. So he described dialysis, and I'm sitting there thinking, either this is something atrocious or this guy does not know what he is talking about. But see, he had already said he was going to write this letter for me. So, like, I was not going to get all up in his grill about whether or not this made any sense. So when he finished, I said, well, that sounds interesting. Are there any other options? And he said in a very cavalier way, well, you can try diet and exercise, but most people aren't able to do that. And I said, why don't we go with that first? I said, I can always do dialysis right if this diet and exercise doesn't work. He said, sure can. I said, so what kind of diet should I go on? He said, a good diet. And I said, so what constitutes a good diet? Because, he's starting to get on my nerves here, but keep in mind, he's writing this letter. So I am not going to get him too upset. I said, so what constitutes a good diet? He said, well, you're smart. You'll figure it out. And that was the nutritional advice I got to start to protect my kidneys. I was smart and I was supposed to figure it out. Now, in retrospect, I realized that I was in Cowtown. Fort Worth, Texas was known as Cowtown. That's where all of the slaughterhouses were. Everybody ate a steak that was this big. So I'm sure that this doctor was reticent to tell me that I should stop eating meat and, red meat products because he didn't want to affect his business. And I understood that. But what I did do is I got the job. And as soon as I got the job, I started going to the mall every evening after work. Like, think about this. I have to exercise, so I decide my exercise track is in the mall. And I had a blast. I would go through every store and every department, and I'd be checking out the sales, but couldn't stop because I got to get all these steps in. So I would go through all of the stores. And at the end of the day, I knew everything that was on sale, everything that I'd been watching, and I'd go back and buy something. So almost every day I was buying something. I ended up with a lot of clothes in my closet. I did decide that if I had too much protein in my urine, that I would stop eating meat. So that was my first move. I'm going to stop eating meat. And it turns out that I became a vegan because I don't cook. When I met my husband in the grocery store, the very first thing I told him after he asked if he could call me was, I don't cook. So, like, don't be confused because I'm in a grocery store. I don't cook for me. I'm not cooking for you. I don't cook for anybody. It turns out he was a vegetarian. And after I told him my story, he said, well, instead of just withdrawing meat from your diet, why don't we try withdrawing some other things? Because, see, I hadn't been given any advice on phosphorus or potassium or calcium or magnesium or none of the things that I know now that I didn't know then. And so for 40 years, I was able to slow the progression of my disease using diet and exercise. And I've had a lot of clinicians say to me, well, how do you know you were able to slow the progression of your disease? I have a family history of kidney disease. My brother, who is 6 years older or younger, was diagnosed at exactly the same age that I was, and he began dialysis at 21. He died 20 years later, not because the dialysis wasn't working, but he just said, I can't take it anymore. I cannot do this. I am done. What I've learned along the way is I did crash into dialysis while I was being evaluated for a transplant. And it turns out that was a good thing because I had an opportunity to be in center to see what that experience was like. It also gave me an opportunity to experience a different diet. The nutritionist and the renal dietitian kept coming by telling me, you need to eat more meat. And I was like, I'm a vegetarian. I don't eat meat. It got me to this point. What they needed to tell me was that at different stages of my disease, I needed to have a different diet. Fortunately, I ran into Katie Wilkins, who was the chief nutritionist. She was the manager of the nutrition department. And she said, look, at the Northwest Kidney Centers, we have a bunch of recipes that you can go online. You can select low phosphorus, low potassium, high protein, whatever it is you need, low sodium. And it will spit out those recipes that will work best for you. And I got to tell you, they got some fettuccine Alfredo sauce on that website. I'm eating it today, and I got a transplant that has lasted for 15 years. They are a great resource, and there are a number of other great resources. And I encourage you to listen to what we've been told today about how having a varied diet, depending on where you are in your journey, is important. Eating foods that have lots of color and get lots of exercise. So thank you for this time, and I appreciate sharing my story.
Thank you so much, Glenda. It's a wonderful story. I always enjoy hearing it. We are happy to take questions. If anybody has any, you can either put them in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, you can just ask your question. So we'll open up the floor now.
Good evening, everyone. This is Dawn Edwards, co-chair of the KPAC. I have a question for, I hear that there's quite a few of you on that are not eating meat. Could you kind of help a meat eater to understand how do you get started with that when you've been raised on the meat, and how do you just not eat it? Is it difficult? Was it difficult? I know Chef Dwayne said he had a little struggle, but I mean, how do you keep going when your body or you feel like your body is craving meat?
That's an interesting question, Don. I just stopped cold turkey. I
Uh,
decided that if this was going to keep me from having to do that dialysis thing he was describing, I would
okay.
just do that. But I did eat a lot of, because see, I didn't know that there was phosphorus in beans. So my boyfriend would cook beans. I ate a lot of nuts. I didn't know there was phosphorus in nuts. And I just said, if this is what I need to do to live, to get that job, and to stay off of dialysis, then I'm willing to do that.
Okay, so your health really was your impetus to to stop.
Absolutely.
Anybody else on the panel that has any tips to just help someone who's a burger fanatic?
Um, yeah, I'd like to pitch in here. So what I did was I started decreasing the amount of animal protein I would eat. So instead of a chicken breast, I would eat a chicken leg and decrease that slowly over time. But what I also did was a lot of my family side dishes, the beans, rice, things like that, I started working on those recipes and making that my main course. So I actually switched to things like I had to learn how to cook tofu. I made horrible tofu the first time I made it. But if you think about tofu, it's a block of protein. And you can make it into a mock egg salad. You can scramble it into a scrambled egg. I use it to make a scrambled egg breakfast burrito, and it's very high in protein. Based on what type of kidney disease you have, wheat gluten is actually very high in protein and very low in potassium and phosphorus. So I've done some work with actually using wheat protein or bulgur wheat, which is the whole grain of wheat, just cut into little pieces. I love using that to make it into a grain bowl because I'm getting protein from the bulgur. I'm getting some protein from the vegetables. If I crumble up some tofu, I'm getting protein from that, from beans, like Glenda said. And the other thing about a grain bowl is you can make a really easy, simple low salt salad dressing. Like I do a balsamic vinaigrette, balsamic vinegar, oil, Dijon mustard. I use the mustard to emulsify that together. And it's really, really flavorful.
Thank you all so much.
I do have a question for Dr. Kalantar. The book that you showed in your opening slides, can you either show that again or put in the chat what the name of it is?
Yes, Kelly, of course. I'm going to send book. Actually, the book is going to have a 2027 edition under the name of same title. That is Nutritional Management of Renal Disease. It's spearheaded by Dr. Joel Koppel, who is the father of nutrition, and I'll do so. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Any additional questions folks have for our
Yeah,
wonderful panel?
hi, this is Dawn Davis. I am a minimal change disease patient as well, and I am vegetarian by nature. But I did have a question on Chef Dwayne. You talked about all of your recipes and stuff. Do you have a cookbook you can buy, or do you have some resources for all of your wonderful concoctions? And also the spices that you talked about too, where to buy those?
Sure. I was actually looking in my cupboard here. Yes. So I do not work for this company. My disclaimer: the company is called Spiceology. They're
Spiceology.
actually
Okay.
located here in Spokane, where I am.
Okay.
Two of my students actually started this company. They have 17 salt-free herb blends, and you can go on their website and look for them. As
Okay.
Glenda was promoting, yes, they have a great curry. They have an amazing ranch. They do a pizza flavor and all of them are salt-free, and they also have the phosphorus amounts on the label, on the nutritional label as well. So
Okay.
that's a great source there. Um, Sorry, what was the other part of the question?
Well, just if you like your recipes or if you've
Oh,
ever thought
yes.
about doing a cookbook.
So actually, yes, I'm working with a current doctor who is a kidney transplant. We are working on a book together.
Fab.
And you can go to the National Kidney Foundation, kidney.org, look under their nutrition section. You will find some recipes I developed for them.
Okay.
Glenda was talking about the Northwest Kidney Centers. I've developed recipes for their website.
Northwest Kidney Center.
There's the Puget Sound Kidney Organization. Their website also has recipes and videos that I've done for them. So
Okay.
those are all great resources. And a lot of the major dialysis companies also have recipes for patients as well.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, great question and good resources. So give it another minute for any additional questions.
Kelly, can I just address some of a couple comments I saw and maybe a couple thoughts for
Absolutely.
them? So we had a couple people comment how they had transplant recently, and before that were eating very plant-focused diet. Now they feel kind of guilty because they're doing animal protein, and they're like, what if it's hurting my kidneys? So one thing to clarify when it comes to food is that you don't have to have meat to have lots of nutrients, but sometimes it's right for some people. And I think that especially when there's a chronic disease and something you've been fighting for a long time, the way we control a lot of times is we do what we can, right? We control what we can, control what we can't. So eating's one of those things. And when you move to a different stage, if you move to a different stage, then sometimes you may need to expand your nutrients for healing. Most of the time, the best thing you can do when working like on expanding your diet is to get real data. So it's real data means looking at your labs, it means tracking your food a little bit. I have a lot of people, even with CKD, where we maybe add a little bit of meat because they genuinely need it to fit some nutrient needs, but some people we take it out. There is not one exact right way. So you follow your labs and you listen to your body. But no matter what, across the board, eating more plants is going to be beneficial. So there is a certain level, they would call it orthorexia, where food now is tied with fear in the kidney space. And food should be about nourishment, not always about control, and not always about like fear, right? So we want to think about it from a nourishing standpoint. It's not wrong to try a fully plant-based diet. That's awesome, right? But use your data and trust your data, which is your body and also your labs and the clinicians that are assessing things too. So if you feel good adding in like eggs or yogurt and that's working for you, then great. We have some people that thrive on that. But there's genuinely not one right way. And I think that's so important for people to understand and to get back to trusting their bodies a little bit.
Excellent points. Yes, that's right. Just looking in the chat here, right? Yes. I'm sure it is hard to go back to eating animal protein after all those years. Can imagine. Any additional questions before we wrap up? Little note from Dawn there. Okay. I'm gonna put in the chat. I have put in the chat a link to register for our last webinar. And right now I'm putting a link into a survey. We would definitely appreciate your feedback. I want to thank everyone who joined the panel tonight and all of you who joined the webinar. for your stories and your insights today. It's been fantastic. I have learned so much myself, and I just think it's such an important topic. So I'm glad we were able to host this webinar for you all. You may not know this, but the forum is a volunteer-led nonprofit with limited financial resources. So if you enjoyed this webinar and would like to see more content from the forum, please do consider making a contribution to our organization. And lastly, if you're not following us on social media, please do. You can help us spread the word about all the forum has to offer, like this webinar series. And that is it for us. We thank you again so much for joining us and hope you all have a wonderful evening. Goodbye.